Talagang lutsara. 근데 무슨 소원 있어? 까까 많이 주세요.
Millennial and Gen Zs are reshaping the world. News generation shares their fresh perspectives on what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is News Generation.
Within the frame, from politics, economy, and diplomacy to culture, explores various issues every day. Delivering the major headlines of the week, analyzed by anchor Kim Mo-gyun and a panel of experts. Tune in for premium news insights presented in an easy, concise manner. 10 minutes of cultural highlights. K-Culture Minutes. Meet the latest trends on K-Now. The creators behind Korean culture on K-People. Korean cinema on K-Story. And the passion of the performing arts on K-Stage. Discover the impact of dynamic Korean culture, one theme a day. Self-improvement. Explore the ever-popular Korean cuisine through one-day classes, K-Food Class. Around the world, Korean food is sparking a cooking fever beyond a simple dining experience. Joseph Lidgerwood, chef-owner of a Michelin 2-star restaurant, steps up for a global audience. This is for anyone who loves K-food. News that brings Korean stories to life. K-Culture Dive. Delivering K-everything, from lifestyle to entertainment and trends. Discover Korea's seasonal landscapes, major issues, exhibition and cultural venues, and diverse cultural news. You'll be drawn deep into the heart of K-culture.
During your study,
Wow, what's going to happen on this?
Party held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the Status UN summit.
A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour.
The Bank of Korea has decided to keep its interest rate steady for the sixth consecutive time, as concerns remain over rising housing prices and the foreign currency exchange rate. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said prospects of relations between Pyongyang and Washington depend entirely on the United States' attitude, saying if the U.S. withdraws its confrontational policy, there's no reason the two sides cannot get along. The comments came as North Korea announced that it held a military parade last night, as it wrapped up one of its biggest political events, the 9th Workers' Party Congress. Samsung Electronics unveiled its Galaxy S26 smartphone series, which contains key AI features that can help users in their daily lives. The company emphasizes that AI is integrated across the operating system of its latest models, providing various AI agents and stronger privacy protection.
We begin this morning with South Korea's central bank, which has kept its benchmark interest rate steady at 2.5%. The Bank of Korea announced the decision this morning following a Monetary Policy Committee meeting. This is the sixth straight rate freeze by the central bank amid continued rising housing prices in the capital area and a weakened Korean won against the US dollar. The central bank also raised the expected growth rate for the current year to 2.0% from 1.8% due to rapid growth in chip exports. Meanwhile, the inflation rate this year was adjusted to 2.2% from 2.1%, considering the weakened Korean won. And now for a deeper analysis of the Bank of Korea's decision, we're joined today by Professor Kim Jin-il, Professor of Economics at Korea University. Professor Kim, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So the Bank of Korea has decided to keep its key interest rate unchanged, and this is something that was widely expected, right? What's behind the central bank's decision?
So basically, the Bank of Korea is considering that the current rate, which is at 2.5%, is basically at a comfortable level as far as the whole Korean economy is concerned. As you mentioned, there are many features that the Bank of Korea is considering about Korean economy. Exchange rate is one thing, stock market is another, but most importantly, its inflation rate and how the economy is evolving in terms of the employment and other parts of the real economy. So some are really good, like the stock markets, and also exchange rate is pretty in the low range relative to where it has been the last several months. But other parts is not doing as well. Inflation is low, but still above the 2% target. And most importantly, economic activities are pretty low. If you go around the restaurants during the lunchtime, you can easily see so many of the restaurants have been closed down, and that's a problem. So overall, Korea is thinking of keeping the rate at 2.5%. And you mentioned that Bank of Korea has been on hold for 6 times. And since they have meetings 8 times a year, it's almost a year. So for almost a year, they think the current rate is at their best or comfortable range.
Right, and how long will the central bank maintain the current interest rate? What can we expect for the rest of the year?
So since they didn't expect any immediate action like going up or down in the near future, that's what they have been thinking. And since they raised the forecast for the Korean growth of 2026 from 1.8%, which was announced 3 months ago, and now it's 2.0%. So given this increase of their projection, I think the Bank of Korea will maintain, unless other events happen on either side. So they will hold it pretty constant. And furthermore, I think actually they announced the rate like 15 minutes ago, and in about 15 minutes, they will issue the statement, which is like 1 page or 2 page, the statement about their short explanation. And with it, first time in their history, in its history, in the history of Bank of Korea, they'll start announce their own dot chart. Like the dot chart in the US Central Bank, it may be called K dot chart by the media, and they will announce what the MPC members, policy members are thinking about what the rate would be 6 months from now. So in 6 months, they will issue the economic projection and when the rate would be, in 6 months, what the rate would be at that time. And 7 members are putting, I believe, 3 dots, and then sort of 21 dots. They'll be announced in about 15 minutes from now. And I'm sure that it will be a hot item for analysts in Yeongju to discuss for a day or at least a few days.
Right, and you talked about inflation. The Bank of Korea also released its updated forecast for the country's economic growth this morning. What's your take on the central bank's inflation outlook?
Inflation outlook is still above 2% target, but it's converging, and next year's expectation is basically 2%, which means that even though it's a little bit low, it's higher than the target, which has been like that since COVID, right? And then other countries were even worse. Like in the US, inflation was around 9% for a few months as for CPI. And Korean inflation was not as high as that, but it was still much higher than 2% target. Now it's moving down to 2%. And in terms of their projection, this year is a little bit above 2%, I think 2.2. But next year, if it moves back to 2%, which is exactly their target, they don't have to match the target every year. They are matching the target in the medium run. So if it is forecasting, it's following the path of the projection in its release this afternoon, I think they will explain why they feel comfortable about this forecast. And if economy stays above 2% in terms of growth and going towards 2% in terms of inflation, I think that's what they call the Korean's potential.
I see. And you also mentioned that the stock market's doing really well. The benchmark Kospi actually topped the 6,000 mark yesterday, just about a month after that surpassed 5,000 points on, largely driven by chipmaker rally, including Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. How long will this momentum last?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, and nobody knows. What I do know for sure is nobody knows. Yeah, that I can tell for sure. And from 5,000 to 6,000 in a month, it's like 20% in a month. I don't know too much about the history of the Korean stock market. So 20% in a month, that's pretty rare, I believe. I don't know when the last the big bubble of Korean economy was. And in the US, there are a few episodes in the recent history. Of course, if you go far, there are more. And I believe that it could be both components. Some of them are like this fast. How long? They cannot increase by 20% many years, right? It's not easy. It's almost impossible. And Korean economy, of course, it was undervalued, that's for sure. But how much? That's a question. So in terms of that, the stock market rally would converge to a similar growth with other countries, the stock market growth, which is still high. That's because of AA, for sure. Yeah. But this fast growth of 20% a month, I think that cannot be sustainable forever. Of course, it could go for a while for sure. I'm not saying it's today or tomorrow, right? But nobody knows when. But some market adjustment, not the huge drop, but like going down to the international average level of stock market growth, that is, I think I can say it's inevitable. But when, that nobody knows.
I see. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
North Korea's ruling party has reiterated its unwavering determination to strengthen its nuclear forces and exercise its status as a nuclear weapon state. According to its state media Korean Central News Agency this morning, the regime's leader Kim Jong-un expressed its defense policy of bolstering national nuclear capabilities as a strategic line in a report during the 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea. He added that Pyongyang would have no reason to not get along well with Washington if the U.S. respects the regime's status as a nuclear-armed state, and suggested that U.S.-North Korea relations depended entirely on the U.S. attitude. At the same time, Kim described South Korea as the most hostile enemy, dismissing the possibility of dialogue and reaffirming North Korea's two hostile states doctrine towards Seoul. Pyongyang also held a military parade on Wednesday night in connection with the Key Party Congress, which concluded on the same day. Over in the United States, the White House is signaling that new U.S. tariffs could soon rise to 15% or higher for some countries. The warning comes after President Trump imposed a 10% global tariff following a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs imposed last year. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The United States is signaling that tariff rates could soon rise beyond the newly imposed 10% global levy. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said Wednesday that while a 10% tariff is currently in place, some countries could see that rate increase to 15% or higher. Speaking during an interview with Fox Business Network, Greer did not name specific trading partners, but said future rates would be in line with tariffs the administration has recently pursued. The comments come after President Donald Trump suffered a setback at the Supreme Court last week when justices struck down his sweeping so-called Liberation Day tariffs introduced last year. In response, Trump announced a new 10% global tariff. According to a notice from U.S. Customs, an additional 10% ad valorem duty, which is a tax levied based on the determined value of the item being taxed, has been imposed on imported goods from every country for 150 days starting Tuesday, unless specifically exempted. Trump has also publicly floated raising tariffs to 15%, citing Section 122 of the Trade Act. That provision allows a president to impose tariffs of up to 15% for up to 150 days to address trade imbalances. The administration says the measures are aimed at protecting U.S. economic interests, while trading partners are closely watching how far Washington is prepared to go. 이승재, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, a key strategy meeting was held on Wednesday to discuss ways to expand tourism and boost the economy. President Lee Jae-myung called for the need to leverage the popularity of K-culture to lead a boom in tourism while people from around the world can feel Korea in person. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Nurturing tourism as a key pillar of economic growth. This as President Lee Jae-myung took matters into his own hands on Wednesday by presiding over a national tourism strategy meeting, the first to be held at the top level in about 7 years.
K-컬처가 촉발한 문화산업의 발전은 결국 대한민국 관광으로 귀결돼야 합니다. 전 세계인들이 직접 대한민국 땅을 밟고 대한민국을 체험할 수 있어야 합니다.
The number of inbound tourists hit nearly 19 million last year, and the government aims to attract 30 million foreign tourists by 2029. On top of that, the president called for the need to balance out resources and create region-specific travel programs to enhance the quality of tourism.
지금처럼 외국인 관광객의 80%가 서울에 집중되는 현실에 만족하면 관광산업의 성장이 한계에 봉착할 수밖에 없습니다. 관광산업 성장의 기회와 과실을 전국 골목 상권 그리고 지역의 소상공인들이 함께 누릴 수 있어야
Ideas for exchange to help boost tourism outside the capital.
For example, Korea can bind together traditional sites in Andong, Pusoksa Temple in Yeongju, and petroglyphs in Ulsan as a connected route and form a cluster for tourism.
Preparations are underway for a Visit Korea Year campaign from 2027 to 2029.
With the help of private firms and related ministries, we will ensure no foreign visitor experiences any inconvenience when paying or using public transport, no matter where they go.
South Korea is also looking to ease visa rules, expand its automated immigration clearance service, and increase international flights to airports located far from the capital area. To root out tourists being ripped off and chronic problems hampering tourism, the government plans to mandate mom-and-pop stores and small lodging houses put up and update price information. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And South Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics has unveiled its latest flagship smartphone series in San Francisco. The Galaxy S26 series focuses on seamless AI to help users in their daily lives. Our An Sung-jin has the details.
Reach, openness, and confidence.
These are the three keywords Samsung Electronics seeks to push forward with its latest Galaxy S26 series. South Korea's tech giant unveiled its latest flagship smartphones at the Unpacked conference in San Francisco on Wednesday, local time. The Galaxy S26 series, including the Galaxy S26 Ultra, Galaxy S26 Plus, and Galaxy S26 emphasize an intuitive artificial intelligence experience that everyone can use.
That's why Galaxy AI is designed to be easy and always available, adapting to you seamlessly and effortlessly without a learning curve.
AI is integrated across the operating system, providing noticeable assistance to users' daily lives. A key feature that reflects this is the Now Nudge, which suggests actions based on context rather than waiting for explicit user commands. For example, the phone automatically checks for scheduling conflicts when receiving a message about a meeting or displays a shortcut linked to a curated page of relevant needed images. Now Brief, a similar feature, organizes daily schedules by extracting not only calendar entries, but also unrecorded meetings from conversations. The Galaxy S26 series also features an integrated AI platform that not only supports its own AI voice assistant Bixby, but also allows users to set Google Gemini and Perplexity as default AI agents. The latest AI also strengthens privacy protection. The Ultra model showcases a privacy display feature, the first of its kind on a mobile device, allowing users to restrict screen visibility. The Ultra and Plus models also introduce AI-based image processing features. And to support these expanded AI capabilities, Samsung has worked on boosting its hardware performance. The Ultra model is powered by Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 8 Elite 5th generation for its chipset improving CPU and GPU performance. It has also minimized performance drops caused by overheating. The Galaxy S26 series is set for release in more than 120 countries, starting with South Korea and the United States on March 11th. Pre-orders in South Korea will run from February 27th until March 5th. 안성진, Arirang News.
And artificial intelligence is also taking flight at South Korea's largest drone exhibition in Busan. Global firms are showcasing the latest unmanned technologies across key industries. Our business correspondent Kim Junong was there.
The future of the skies is no longer science fiction, but an AI-driven reality reshaping both battlefields and industries. Asia's largest drone exhibition, DSK 2026, is underway in Busan, drawing participants from more than 20 countries. Defense remains the industry's most strategic domain, with the Ministry of National Defense unveiling AI-driven combat systems and autonomous operations. Developed by the ROK Army, this drone integrates AI algorithms trained on simulated combat scenarios to assess targets and simplify conventional command procedures.
The AI identifies the most suitable military unit and weapons for the target, and the information is sent directly, allowing for a much faster response.
Industry players are also integrating AI into new drone capabilities. This surveillance drone, supplied to the Marine Corps, can detect floating objects in inaccessible areas, suggesting uses beyond the battlefield.
For example, AI now powers agricultural machinery and even seed planting drones, making everyday tasks more efficient. Today, AI is at the center, with drones serving simply as the platform for its expanding applications.
Beyond the exhibition floor, global visitors are closely watching Korea's growing drone capabilities. What stands out to many is the industry's ability to deliver fully integrated solutions.
The Korean companies are very competitive. What I admire is the capability to build the final product and sell the final product with all the support, software and hardware. That's very inspiring.
Drones are expanding their role across multiple next-generation industries, and with AI now embedded in these systems, a new chapter is beginning. Kim Junong, Arirang News, Busan.
An F-16C fighter jet has crashed in a mountainous area near Yeongju in Gyeongsang-Bukdo Province during a nighttime training exercise. South Korea's Air Force says the aircraft assigned to Cheongju Air Base went down at around 7:31 p.m. on Wednesday. The pilot safely ejected and was found stuck in a tree at around 8:10 p.m. Authorities completed the rescue operation shortly before 10 p.m. He was taken to a hospital and is reportedly in good condition. The Air Force says no civilian damage has been reported, and a task force has been formed to determine the cause of the crash.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. The United States imposed a new wave of sanctions on Iran on Wednesday, one day before nuclear talks resume in Geneva. The new sanctions target ships, companies, and individuals accused of selling Iranian oil to fund Tehran's ballistic missile and weapons programs. The Treasury Department said the penalties hit 12 vessels and several firms tied to Iran's oil exports and weapons procurement. The sanctions freeze U.S.-based assets and bar most financial dealings with American entities. As well as economic pressure, the U.S. has positioned 2 aircraft carriers and large fleets of fighter jets in the region, signaling readiness for military action if negotiations collapse. President Donald Trump has demanded Iran abandon uranium enrichment, while Iran's foreign minister said Tehran will not give up its right to peaceful nuclear technology, but insists it will never develop a nuclear weapon. The high-stakes talks come amid rising regional tensions following U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites last year. In the U.S., Harvard University announced on Wednesday that former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers will retire from his academic post at the end of the school year as the university reviews his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Summers, who had once been the university's president, has been on leave since November. Newly released Justice Department files show years of contact between Summers and Epstein, including visits and email exchanges. Summers previously acknowledged that his association with Epstein was a major error in judgment. U.S. tech firm Nvidia on Wednesday topped Wall Street expectations and issued a first quarter forecast that beat analyst estimates, underscoring continued momentum in artificial intelligence spending. The chip maker posted fourth quarter revenue of $68.1 billion, up 73% from a year earlier, and earnings of $1.62 per share, both above forecasts. Profit nearly doubled to about $43 billion. Data center revenue climbed to $62.3 billion, fueled largely by hyperscale cloud providers expanding AI capacity. Nvidia projected first quarter sales between $76 and nearly $80 billion, exceeding Wall Street's $72.8 billion estimate. Shares rose more than 3% in after-hours trading. Kyoto Mayor Koji Matsui on Wednesday proposed Japan's first dual bus fare system, lowering costs for city residents while charging more to non-residents as part of efforts to curb over-tourism. Kyoto, home to 1.43 million residents, welcomed more than 56 million tourists in 2024, including a record 10.88 million foreign visitors. City officials said congestion and delay on buses have become severe. Kyoto plans to seek approval from Japan's Transport Ministry and aims to introduce the system as early as April 2027.
It feels as though spring has arrived early. After a chilly start, the morning is warming up quickly, so heavy coats will feel a bit too warm in the afternoon. Although it remains winter on the calendar, temperatures are running nearly a month ahead of a schedule, and it's going to stay that way through the weekend in the capital region. Meanwhile, dry weather advisories remain in place for the capital area and parts of Gangwon-do province, and fire precautions remain essential while the air quality stays clean nationwide today. And this afternoon, most major cities will be getting up to 14 degrees Celsius, with more clouds expected in the southern parts of Korea, with rain starting from Jeju Island tonight. In fact, Jeju and the east of Gangwon will see more wet weather, while southern provinces will be under cloudy skies through early next week. So please plan accordingly for your long weekend.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
country where traditional and modern cultures coexist.
Where you can explore spectacular landscapes and nature.
Savor the delights of traveling at every turn.
Where? Korea, of course.
There are some must-visit places in Korea. Ones that appear in every tour guidebook: Hangang River, Gyeongbokgung Palace from the Joseon Dynasty, and...
Yes, these are essentials, but I want to go somewhere a little different. I don't have to follow the guidebook. For example, filming locations for K-pop music videos or K-dramas and movies.
Traveling is all about taking it slow. A long walk at your own pace, or even zoning out somewhere quiet. Doesn't it sound relaxing?
You travel for the experience, trying something new in a foreign place, de-stressing and making lifetime memories, taking tons of pictures along the way.
70% of the Korean territory is mountainous. Naturally, hiking is a very popular pastime in Korea. Not your kind of activity? Trust me, the view will make the effort worth it. Just catch your breath by the cold stream in the valley.
Korea is surrounded by the sea on three sides. From the beach, you can enjoy a wide open view as well as various water activities. But the riverside is great too. There's plenty to see and do.
If you're in Korea, you can't miss the night view full of dazzling lights.
Yes, even the same place can have a totally different vibe at night.
Want to make unforgettable memories?
How about traveling to all corners of Korea? Join us next time to explore more about Korean culture.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, February 26th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Niall.
Good morning.
Good morning. Also Fabius with us.
Great to be here.
Both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're nearing the end of the work weekend. For many of us, it's a perfect time to pause, reset, and maybe enjoy something a little more calming. And one of the simplest ways to unwind, of course, is through music. And lately, it seems listeners are moving beyond beyond mainstream hits, with more niche and unexpected genres starting to gain attention. And among them is a timeless favorite that's finding a new audience: classical music. So Niall, let me ask you, do you personally like classical music?
I'm gonna have to be a little honest. I personally hated classical music growing up because it was so forced on me, and most Korean kids go to piano academies from a young age. I did too. I also played flute in wind ensemble until high school. My dad would wake me up in the morning by blasting intense classical music. Like, imagine waking up to ba ba ba, ba, ba. And it was a bit traumatic in some ways, so it was not a good experience. But I actually married a classical pianist. My husband has the classical background, so he would share why he loves certain composers and even recommend what kind of classical music I would actually like, because it's not all the same. So nowadays, I do enjoy classical music more and more.
Did you find like an area or a period of classical music that you enjoy?
Right. I think it's more impressionist in kind of the later modern era. Some people would argue, oh, that's not the real classical era, but it's still orchestral. And compared to all the modern electronic instruments, when I listen to it, I feel the sense of soothing coming over me.
I guess that's a lot. Yeah, that's why a lot of people like classical music. What about you, Fabian?
Well, for me, I'm just obsessed with classical music these days, honestly.
Okay.
And it's a very big change for me because also when I was a kid, I also felt forced into music school. I did piano, I was part of the choir, and I didn't really like it. I found it very boring and uninteresting. And that is because, you know, my whole family was full of musicians. My sister is also a full-time pianist, especially jazz. And then my father and also my uncle, they were both guitarists.
Wow.
So it was all around me, and I just felt a little bit overwhelmed, but I never found it interesting. And I feel like these days I find that it really evokes some special emotions that are very hard to find in other types of genres. And these days I'm really into the romantic era, especially ballet. So I like Tchaikovsky or Alexander Glazunov.
Oh wow, you sound very cultured when
I
you're saying
have
that.
to read it though, because the names are a little bit confusing, honestly.
Right, I think a lot of people can relate to these kind of experiences. When you're surrounded by something as a child especially, you don't always appreciate it right away, but later you begin to hear it a little differently. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen. For a long time, classical music was often seen as something enjoyed mainly by older generations. But today, more young people are discovering its charm in their own way. And while classical music has its roots in Europe, Korean artists are now gaining global recognition, helping reshape the genre's image and reach. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at how the popularity of Western classical music has grown in Korea, the increasing global spotlight on Korean artists, and what lies ahead for the future of Korea's classical music scene. As we just saw in a video, classical music in Korea has evolved far beyond its European origins, developing its own strong culture and audience over time. So to really understand the surge in interest in today's classical scene here in Korea, it helps to look at how it all began. So first, could you walk us through, Niall, how classical music, which has its roots very clearly in Europe, grew to be so big in Korea?
The full-scale development of Western classical music in South Korea did not begin until shortly after the Korean War, so a little bit late to the game, but it quickly became widely popular. As I mentioned, most Koreans are exposed to classical music from a very young age. Even if becoming a pianist is not their dream, many learn piano as a hobby. But for those who do go on to play on the bigger stages, it helps that they trained in refining the techniques from a very early age. Accuracy and precision is their forte, if you know what I mean. The classical music infrastructure is also exceptionally well developed, and not only in Seoul, but throughout the country, there are many concert halls, institutions, and academies. Classical performances are held frequently, and somewhere in the city, there is always some classical concert happening. And because many people enjoy it, the industry has naturally grown as well.
So it sounds like Korea's early exposure to classical music, combined with a strong education and performance infrastructure, helped create both skilled musicians and a large audience at the same time. So in a way, classical music became part of everyday life rather than something distant or elitist. And that strong foundation seems to be influencing a new generation of listeners today as well. So Fabio, what else is behind this growing popularity, especially among young people?
I feel like there's this common perception that this classical music tends to cater or aligns a little bit more with the taste of older generations, especially middle-aged or even older. But I do feel like the MC generation is shifting towards more niche communities and different types of interests. And this stems from the fact that the MC generation is a little bit oversaturated by this type of short-form content that is very superficial and inefficient in achieving those very deep emotions. People are really craving to feel something different and getting something more immersive. So that is why people are tending to change the things that they like and the things that they consume. For example, I just mentioned that I'm very into classical music these days, but honestly, that comes from that same reason. I was a little bit tired of the things that I was seeing in social media, and I just wanted something that made me feel. And that's what I found in classical music. And I feel like the consumer behavior inside the MC generation really proves that. Let's take, for example, Cho Sung-jin, one of the most famous classical musicians here in Korea. 45% of the online ticket buyers from his concert last year were people in their 20s. 70% were people in their 30s, with over 60% of the audience being part of the MC generation, which is quite impressive. And then we also see orchestral arrangements being introduced into projects that have been very successful with younger audiences. Let's take, for example, Wicked, the movie that was very, very good at selling tickets 2 years ago and also last year. The soundtrack of this movie, that was also inspired by the musical from Broadway, achieved top 1 in the Billboard album selling charts in 2024. We also have different albums and projects like Lux or Lux from Spanish artist Rosalia, which is quite unconventional for a Latin album to be that way and including those type of aspects from classical music, but it was very successful. So I'm pretty surprised with the changes that are happening nowadays.
I'm really glad you mentioned that album, Rosalia's album, because I feel like that also shows how mainstream and kind of cool it's become. Like going to a Cho Sung-jin concert is like as cool, almost as cool as going to a K-pop concert among young people these days. So all of this really shows how the meaning of classical music is changing from something once seen as more formal or traditional into a form of comfort and mindfulness for younger listeners. Rather than fast and fleeting content, many seem to be looking for deeper, more immersive experiences, which they find in classical music performances. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Arirang News YouTube channel asking which area of classical music do you like? So here's what the results showed. Piano ranked overwhelmingly at the top, preferred by 54% of respondents. String instruments followed with 25%, while vocal music accounted for 11%. Wind instruments were chosen by 10%, making them the least preferred among the categories surveyed. So it's interesting to see that piano is taking such a strong lead in the poll, and that really reflects how many people in Korea are introduced to classical music through piano lessons at a young age. But as many Korean musicians continue their musical journey, a large number eventually look beyond Korea to further develop their craft. And in particular, Germany is often mentioned when talking about classical music education. So why has Germany become such an important destination for many classical musicians, Niall?
Right. Germany, the country that produced Ludwig van Beethoven, is considered one of the key birthplaces of European classical music. Among Koreans who pursue classical music, many have studied in Germany. I personally have 2 family members who went to Germany for classical singing, which they're very famous for. Across the world, and many different competitions are held there, and the general perception is that Koreans excel well in classical music, so the two go together very well.
Right, and that really highlights how strong the connection has become between Korea and the European classical tradition, with this close connection now translate into actually remarkable achievements by Korean artists on the global stage. So Fabio, could you share some recent examples of Korean classical musicians and composers who have been receiving attention overseas?
lots of achievements. For example, in 2025, we had composer Park Yeon-hee, who received Germany's Order of Merit First Class, which is one of the biggest honors that you can receive in Germany. It was not only symbolic as a personal type of achievement, but it was also a way of putting Korea in the map of global recognition and presence for Korean classical music. And then similarly, composer Jin Eun-suk was awarded the Ernst von Siemens Music Prize. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And this was in 2024, which, by the way, this prize is considered the Nobel Prize of classical music, so that was quite impressive. In fact, this composer was already highly respected in the contemporary music community in those circles, but then she also had a documentary released about herself, which made her be even more visible to a broader audience. So that's good. And then beyond composition, we also have musicians, performers. So for example, violinist Lee Ji-yoon has for the longest time been the first female concertmaster in Berlin State Opera Orchestra ever since 2017, which is quite impressive. It was definitely groundbreaking and historically significant, but at the same time, it shows this very slight evolution in the traditions and standards of one of Europe's most conservative and traditional musical institutions.
And hearing those very impressive examples makes it clear that Korean classical artists are gaining not only visibility, but deep respect within the traditional heart of classical music itself. And to gain an insider's perspective on this, we're going to talk to someone who studied music in Germany. That conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Haram, who's a soprano at the Incheon City Chorale and has previously studied in Germany. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello.
So Haram, why did you choose to study in Germany, and tell us about your experience there?
I chose to study in Germany because it's one of the historical centers of classical music and opera. I really wanted to experience that tradition firsthand and immerse myself in the language and culture. So I moved there when I was 18 and completed both my bachelor's and master's degrees in vocal performance, focusing on opera at the University of Music and Dance Cologne. It was challenging at times, but also incredibly inspiring. That experience shaped me both technically and artistically.
Wow. Can you tell us about the prominence of Korean classical musicians in Germany today?
I would say Korean classical musicians are very prominent in Germany today. It's quite common to see Korean singers and instrumentalists performing in German opera houses and orchestras. They are widely respected for their strong technique and discipline. I've also heard about concerts dedicated entirely to Korean art songs in areas with large Korean communities, which I think really shows both recognition and cultural influence.
And what makes Korean classical musicians stand out internationally?
In my opinion, I think the strength of Korean classical musicians is the special feelings of Korean people. You know, Koreans have unique emotions. For example, Han, Hung, and Jung. We know what those feelings are, but in other culture, it is hard to explain. In this point, these special emotions of Korea make to understand Western music in a creative way. Think about it. Explain about music of Beethoven or Mozart through Han, Hung, and Jung. this is great opportunity for Korean musician, and now this Korean style is uploaded in German too. When I played my master's graduation performance, I performed Adele in Die Fledermaus. At that time, I tried to sing the role as if she were a Korean character with Hung and Jung. I sang like a lively Korean heroine with energy and sincerity. And it was very successful. So what I want to say is Korean's unique emotion is a great strength for Korean classical musicians to go global.
That's so interesting because I've never actually thought about how those emotions that are so unique to Korea, like Chung, could be applied to European classical music. So I guess I'll be having to listen to more Korean interpretations of classical music from now on. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've just heard from an opera singer who studied in Germany, sharing her first-hand experience of how Korean classical musicians are recognized there, as well as the unique strengths that define Korea's classical music scene today. And beyond Germany, the global reach of Korea's classical music scene continues to expand. So, Niall, how widely recognized is Korea's classical music scene around the world today?
Right. Even people who are not deeply familiar with classical music know about pianist Cho Sung-jin, the first Korean to win the Chopin International Piano Competition in 2015, or pianist Im Yoon-chan, who became the youngest winner of Van Cliburn competition in 2022. Of course, same goes for vocalist Cho Soo-mi. In college, I had the privilege of studying abroad in Europe, and I went to go see musicals and concerts. And though I couldn't speak any Hungarian, many people heard I was from Korea, and they would come up to me and tell me how much they loved Cho Soo-mi. It was like the equivalent of these people knowing BTS. And the same goes for cellist Jang Han-na and how prevalent they are across Europe. And these classical, we can call them Hallyu stars, have tremendous ticket power, allowing them to hold concerts around the world and meet classical music fans everywhere.
Like you say, you usually hear those stories with K-pop stars.
Right.
That's really impressive.
But these are these people's idols.
So it's fascinating how even people who aren't always deeply familiar with classical music also recognize these artists. So basically, I guess international competition wins and global tours have clearly helped turn Korean musicians into true classical stars. So where are we seeing Korea's classical music performers gaining more momentum and recognition internationally, Fabio?
Well, there's three places that come to mind: Spain, the US, and Japan. So for Spain, which is my home country, I have great news. Last year, 2025, it was the 75th anniversary of international relationships between Korea and Spain. So they celebrated a Korean classical music festival. We had performers like Ha-young Park, a viola player, and also Chloe Ji-young-moon, a pianist, and people were amazed. Then in the US, we had the LA Philharmonic, which hosted the Seoul Festival, which was also very good in terms of reactions from the audience. And then in last place, we have Japan, who has been investing in Korean talent for the longest time. They have been doing this collaborative stages with Korean classical music artists ever since the early 2000s.
So what's really exciting about this is that it shows that the music is no longer limited to individual success stories, but is becoming part of larger cultural exchanges and international festivals. So with this expanding global presence, attention is naturally turning to what comes next. So Fabio, what does the future look like for Korea's classical music scene?
Well, if we really think about it, classical music is the base of every form of music. Every single genre comes a little bit from classical music, but it's also in constant evolution. So I'm really curious to see how this classical music realm ends up developing in Korea in a unique style, something different. I feel like there's a lot of experimental projects going on, and especially with things going a little bit more mainstream, as you guys have mentioned before, I see it maybe becoming something special for K-pop, for example.
Ooh, that's
and I've
exciting.
seen already artists like Red Velvet implementing this leitmotifs or very iconic parts from musical pieces into their singles. And I'm very curious to see about how Korean artists that are mainstream can make classical music even more mainstream, plus with a more Korean touch.
There's a lot to look forward to. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I love that Fabio mentioned Red Velvet using classical music and K-pop songs. It's been a while, but I re-listened to the Seoul Philharmonic's arrangement of their song Feel the Rhythm, which was originally inspired by classical music, and then so they went back and covered it. But they also covered Girls' Generation's Into the New World. And listening to that, the orchestral sounds from classical music, it has a very unique way of moving people's hearts. And some purists may not count this music as classical music, but I say it's a modern adaptation of it. And what's important is that younger people are learning to enjoy it in their own way and really learning to appreciate the live orchestral instruments.
Right. So from concert halls in Seoul to K-pop modern classical adaptations and to stages around the world, Korean classical music is clearly entering a new era. What was once seen as a traditional genre is now connecting with younger audiences and crossing cultural boundaries. And amid this surging interest, Korean artists are proving that classical music can evolve while staying timeless. And that's why the future of Korea's classical music scene looks global and shows no signs of slowing down. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Niall.
No problem.
And also Fabio.
Thank you for having me.
For joining us today. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. And we hope that today inspires you to add some classical music into your playlist. We are News Generation.
저희 누나가 발레를 하다 보니까 자연스럽게 누나 발레 학원에 따라가서 누나가 하는 모습을 보니까 저도 하고 싶다고 생각이 조금 들어서 발레 음악에 맞춰서 아무 춤이나 추다 보니까 그냥 그 음악에 맞춰서 제가 몸을 움직이는 게 재밌다고 느껴졌었는지 발레를 계속 하고 있더라고요. 나이가 좀 어릴 때 제가 가진 장점이 무엇인지도 모르고 아예 제가 가진 단점도 모를 때 발레를 시작했다 보니까 제일 큰 문제가 이제 평발이었던 것 같아요. 평발이다 보니까 발레를 할 때 쥐가 조금 많이 나는 편이라 그거를 견뎌가면서 춤을 계속 춰야 했던 거 그게 가장 극복하기 힘들었던 것 같고요. 제가 다리가 다른 친구들보다 조금 두껍다고 해서 제 다리를 조금 싫어했었는데 근데 이제 로잔에 갔다 오고 나서 오히려 제 다리에서 나오는 파워풀한 힘이 좋았다고 해주시는 분들도 있다는 걸 느껴가지고 그 두 개가 가장 극복하기도 힘들었고 기억에 남는 것 같아요. 프릭스티 로잔이라는 콩쿨 자체가 학생들 사이에서는 가장 크고 의미 있는 콩쿨이다 보니 제가 그 로잔 영상을 보면서 자라왔기 때문에 그 무대에 서서 제가 춤을 췄다는 것 자체가 엄청 인상 깊었던 것 같아요. 제가 걸어왔던 길, 이게 맞는 방법일까? 근데 그런 의구심을